Let's join together in singing the first two verses of Amazing Grace, number 547. Stand. So first of all, I want to thank Schulz for being part of the service. When Jill asked me if I'd be interested in covering for her, I said sure. And then I thought of Kurt. Kurt and I have known each other since forever. We both grew up in the Church of Peace in Glencoe. His parents were very active in the church, Les and Bernie. And then somewhere along the line, Kurt became Lutheran. So we both grew up on farms. Kurt is still on the home place north of Glencoe. And I was a little bit southeast from his farm, both near the Crow River. I heard a lot of tales about the natives that roamed the area. One of my favorite things to do growing up was to sneak out the bedroom window. And it was on the first floor. And walk over to, go ahead and sit down. Sorry, I missed that. And I have a big note here too. Make them sit down. And I would walk over, it's about maybe not even a quarter of a mile. It was just down the road to Mraz's Woods. Now Mraz brothers owned the woods and some land that was tilled, but they lived in Silver Lake. So I knew they didn't care if I went over there. And I would go over at night and I would sit in a clearing in the woods, and it was just full of fireflies. It was amazing. Well, my dad found out what I was doing. And one time, I overheard a conversation between my parents. And Dad said, so-and-so told me, Henry Richter told me that, he'd been over there at night. And he saw the ghost of Little Crow and his men. Well, that kind of ended that. But it was a good time growing up in this part of the world. And I don't think we appreciate what those who have gone before us have gone through. So thank you, Kurt, for being part of my life. When my family and I moved back to Glencoe from Portland, Oregon, Kurt and I appeared in a lot of plays together. So we're friends and we are going to do this. So let's start with the responsive reading. Triune God, We come before you as many parts of a single body.
People from every tribe, every nation, every language.
Some indigenous people of the land, some refugees, immigrants, pilgrims, people on the move.
All of us searching for an eternal place where we belong.
Creator, forgive us. The earth is yours and everything that is in it.
But we forget. In our arrogance, we think we own it.
In our greed, we think we can steal it.
In our ignorance, we worship it.
In our thoughtlessness, we destroy it. We forget that you created the earth to bring praise and joy to you.
Mend the wounds of our hearts, and let us live in justice and peace with people from every tribe and every tongue.
So the movie that had been associated with this Sunday service was Brother Bear. I had never seen it before. It's not my favorite. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. But I came out of it with the idea that communication is central and important. And maybe we should think before we try and walk in the footsteps of others. It's all about learning life lessons. For if there are children present, we have kits in the back of the church for beaded bracelets. So go down there and see what will happen. Okay, so before we get into silent prayer, I wanted to talk a little bit about how prayer is appreciated and done among some of the tribes. As I was looking around for something to bring, I grabbed our burden basket. Now these come in all sizes. Traditionally, way back when, before reservations, they were huge. And the women put them on their back to go collect wood or vegetables and that type of thing. We could have a little talk about feminism here if you wanted, but that's just the way it was. In fact, the fires that were used inside the teepees were called grandma fires because the amount of wood it took to start a fire was judged by the amount of wood a grandmother could carry in her huge burden basket, which was put on her back. Many tribes use them in a lot of different ways. The Indians of the southwestern part of the United States, with their sweat lodges, they will, before they enter the sweat lodge, they will mentally place their prayers and their burdens on the side of the sweat lodge. And then when they're in the sweat lodge, they will pray. And then it's up to them when they leave if they want to carry that burden with them once again. The many tribes of the Midwest, all the way down to Cherokee, Oklahoma, whatever, they carry or use the burden basket hanging outside of their home. And when you go to visit them, you are told not to bring bad temperament in, anger, anything that is bothering you. And so this is hanging on the side of the home, and as you go by and you say, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with that kid today. How can I handle it? Okay, so you would put one for Jack into the burden basket and then not worry about it while you were visiting whoever, okay? And then when you left their house, you could take it out to deal with it some more if you wanted to. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful way of saying, I'm over it. So, Let's move on. Kurt?
You want me to do the scripture reading? The scripture reading today is from Job chapter 23, verses 1 through 9 and 16 through 17. Then Job answered, "Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No, but he would give heed to me. There an upright person could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. If I go forward, he is not there, or backward, I cannot perceive him. On the left he hides, and I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. God has made my heart faint, and the Almighty has terrified me. If only I could vanish in darkness, and thick darkness would cover my face."
Now leading into silent prayer. Let's pretend. I'm really good at that. When we each entered the building, there were hooks down in the narthex, and each one had a name on it. And as you came in, you placed your burden there. Now it's up to you, in silent prayer, to deal with it. Amen. Are there any prayers of the people this morning?
Mandy has one.
I'll just popcorn it out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I just want to ask a prayer for Ruby, and my family. We're going through a custody thing. She's been taken out of the home, and they're looking at me as possible, permanent placement. And so I just want to ask to keep us in your thoughts and prayers. We find out a definite answer on Monday, and I'm just preparing to have her come and be a part of our family.
Thank you. We hold you and your family in the light of Christ.
Creator and Redeemer, as we approach you in prayer, make us walk in beauty and balance. Make us open our hearts and minds. Make us speak the truth. We pray for all our relatives in the circle of life throughout all creation. The circle of love is repeatedly broken because of the sin of exclusion. We create separate circles, the inner circle and the outer circle, the circle of power and the circle of despair, the circle of privilege and the circle. The circle of love is broken whenever there is alienation, whenever there is misunderstanding, whenever there is insensitivity and hardening of the heart. The circle of love is broken whenever we cannot see eye to eye, whenever we cannot link hand to hand, whenever we cannot live heart to heart. Call us to kinship. Mend the hoop of our hearts and let us live in justice and peace, respecting the dignity of every person, tribe, language, and nation. Creator, you bent the earth like a bow until it was one round, shining planet. Renew the circle of the earth and turn the hearts of all your people to one another, that they and all the earth may live. Amen.
And now let's join together in the Lord's Prayer, and this will be the Les brainwave here, Nez Perce version, as written by a Hattie Corbett. Let's do it together. All great Spirit, you are our shepherd chief, in the most high place whose home is everywhere, even beyond the stars and moon. Whatever you want done, let it be done everywhere. Give us your gift of bread day by day. Forgive us our wrongs as we forgive those who wrong us. Take us away from wrongdoings. Free us from all evil, for everything belongs to you. Let your power and glory shine forever. Amen. Just a reminder that we do not pass an offering plate here. There is a place at the back for you to place any checks, cash, ideas, whatever. And as far as things that are going on this coming week, we have the wind-up for the warm clothing drive for our friends in South Dakota. So far, we're at 6 boxes. So we have met last year. It's amazing, thanks to all of you. I think at this point, we are missing some heavy-duty winter caps with kind of the flaps for people. And then also heavy gloves are lacking. So keep that in mind this coming week. I will be talking to you again next Sunday, and that's the last time. I'm sorry. This week on the 9th, we have the Spirit Journey Meditation, and that's at 9 a.m. in the Education Building. We have Council meeting on the 18th. We have Fall Cleanup, and that's on October 16th from 9:30 to 12:30. Bring your gloves and rakes and that type of thing. And Wednesday at 6 p.m., the movie Milo movie. You know, I have a horrible time with that because there's a town called Milan, which is a fantastic, artsy little town. And so, but you know the movie. Julie? Mulan. I know Mulan, but does she live in Milan? You know? Okay.
I just want to let you know you can still give to Neighbors in Need. There are envelopes back there. I haven't sent it in yet. And I have the new book. Now I'm drawing blank. I meant to bring it up here. John Pavlich's new book. What's it called,
God
John?
is love, don't be a jerk.
What?
If God
If God is love, don't be a jerk. Okay, and it's a really fun read. I'm enjoying it, and I have one back there if you want to look at it, because we'd love to have some more people join us for that book study. So, thank you.
Mulan. Untrainable.
But she doesn't live in
Yeah. I just wanted to briefly mention before I start the message, or part of it, kind of like good cop, bad cop here. As I was starting to research, we have an awful lot of Native American books. And as I mentioned that Kurt has taken lessons in Dakota. And my husband Dick also took lessons in Dakota down at Morton. And one day after being down there for lessons, he came home with a book like this. of Dakota words and translations. And then after Dick died, I gave it to Kurt. And so I'm happy to inform you that the rest of the service is now going to be done in Dakota. No translation. Anyway, we have a lot of books, and I went through some of them. And a couple of weekends ago, I helped my daughter and son-in-law with a 4-day garage sale. His mother has moved into an apartment, and so there were 4 storage units full of stuff, an empty barn full of stuff, and her house and garage. And as I was going through the books, I came upon this. Yeah, they're saying we're not teaching our children about our past. The Sioux Uprising of 1862. Okay? Published by the Minnesota Historical Society, and this copy came from the Glencoe Middle School. So they were learning, well, maybe they didn't look at the book. You know, that's one way of looking at it. So you take this, it's just full of interesting things. And this is now what they publish from the Historical Society. And they changed it from Uprising to the U.S. Dakota War of 1862. Take it for what it's worth. So, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He had 3 ships, and he left from Spain. He sailed through the sunshine, wind, and rain. He sailed by night, he sailed by day, he used the stars to find his way. A compass also helped him know how to find the way to go. And it goes on and on and on. Making landfall in what is now the Bahamas on October 12th, 1492, Columbus, Nitawa, was the first of a wave of European explorers who decimated the native populations in the Americas in a quest to find gold and other wealth, including people to enslave. Does renaming Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day, does it make a difference? Probably not much if you're native. Probably just another attempt to make things right. However, an amazing thing is happening today in Spain. So every so often, something unexpected comes across my Facebook. And this is from an artist that I follow. And she writes, "There are those who always knew one can't discover a country where people always live. And finally, I may see some recognition that I always felt was right. This morning, we're off for a special visit to a place where we're going to see Christopher Columbus's actual maps. I will take photos, and I'm expecting them to reveal that he did not discover America. I have continuously been overwhelmed by the point of tears. But the Tuscany region government and Florence government's dedication to righting the wrongs committed against American Indian people, it's been above others. What's more, they see us, they hear us, and they have respect for us. And it boggles my mind. If only our government could see us as they do. When I say us, I mean all of our tribal nations. They know our pain, they know the human rights abuses our people have suffered, and they're wanting to do everything they can to change us. Sunday is going to be a big day, as it will be ceremoniously announced that they are officially replacing Christopher Columbus Day with Remembrance Day for the Dakota and all tribal nations of Turtle Island. And included were pictures of all the royalty of Turtle Island in their headdresses and beaded accoutrements, and sitting there among them all were the officials from Spain, bowing down to these native peoples. It was amazing. There was also, for the first time, a proclamation by the president in regard to Native Americans Day, or whatever you want to call it. Today we acknowledge the painful history of wrongs and atrocities that many European explorers inflicted on the tribal nations and indigenous communities. It's a measure of our greatness as a nation that we do not seek to bury these shameful episodes of our past, that we face them honestly and bring them to the light. And we do all that we can to address them. You know, sometimes it's really difficult to live with our past. We all have one, a past. And we sometimes hear phrases like, that was so in the past, forget it. Or, quit living in your past. You can never ignore your past. So, let's turn back the clock. This church and its people have a very strong past. It started in the winter of 1862. In 1862, there were 94 people living in Hutch. Most of them who live on my street and stay up late at night and play music. This was the first church organized in Hutchinson. Now, try to visualize someone sitting at the old pump organ, and we hear the congregation singing, with gusto. All together now. A mighty fortress is our God, number 439.
Almighty
1970, 8 years later. At that time, it had a total of 4 members. 1862. You know, it's all in the history books. The Civil War had drained all of Minnesota's manpower for 16 months, and the 4-year-old state was soon embroiled in a war in its own backyard. From the reservations along the upper Minnesota River, the Sioux, led by their chief Little Crow, rose to take the citizens of the Minnesota River Valley in surprise. Before the uprising could be brought under control, at least 450 white settlers and soldiers were killed. What caused the uprising? It stemmed from past events and also from the Sioux's long history of conflict. In the 19th century, westward moving settlers and the government further compressed the Sioux domain. In 1851, a treaty was signed which further shrunk their lands. The price the government was to pay was to be $1,410,000 in cash, and then annuities spread over a 50-year period. In all, the Sioux lost 24 million acres of rich agricultural land. Now, I've been trying to put this in perspective. My heritage is mostly Swiss, dairy farmers. We settled between here and Chaska, New Glarus, Wisconsin, and then there are a whole bunch of us out by Millbank, South Dakota. The rolling hills reminded them of home. Now, imagine if the government had kicked all of the Swiss off of their dairy farms and they never got paid. We would have been pretty upset. Now, the Swiss as a nation, they are known to be peaceful, but you get one individual Swiss person alone, and it can get nasty. So the days passed, and the Sioux waited and waited, and the annuity money never came. Trying to speed up the payment, Chief Little Crow attended church at the Episcopal Church near Morton. And it is said that in good faith, he went around and shook hands with everyone there. Still no money. The match was lit. News of killings in Action. Now, I had to look that one up. I had never heard of Action before, and it's up north near Grove City. News of that action came to Hutchinson on August 18th. More attacks followed from New Ulm to Woodlake to Fort Ridgely, and the town of Hutchinson was attacked on September 4th. A stockade had been built 100 feet square and 8 feet high. At any time, there were 300 or more people inside that stockade. I find that unbelievable. You know, back in the Mankato State days, my husband and 2 toddlers and I lived in a trailer. It wasn't a mobile home, it wasn't a manufactured house, it was a trailer. 10 feet wide and 50 feet long. And there were days when we were pushing at the walls because it was too small. But here we have 300 minimum people in that stockade downtown, and then you start thinking about, what about hygiene, you know? The farmers, now they would go out during the day and tend to their crops and their animals, but at night they would come back to the stockade. Some of you may have had relatives who lived in this area during that time. I can't imagine what it was like to go through it, but we are so glad they did. Now, the attacks continued until the surrender at Camp Release on September 26th. Now, there is a monument to that just at the edge of Montevideo on 212. Been there many times. Following the 1,200 Indians that were taken into custody, and that number increased daily as we saw groups continue to surrender. 1,700 uncondemned men, women, and children were sent on foot from the Lower Sioux Agency near Morton to Fort Snelling. The 303 Indians who had been condemned were moved to Mankato. And of that number, the Sioux were scheduled. Of that number, 38 Sioux were scheduled for hanging. Now, the people of Minnesota, and I don't know how they polled this or found out about it, but it is said that the people of Minnesota insisted that the Sioux be permanently sent out of the state. And they were sent to Crow Creek, South Dakota, and told to never come back. Not exactly a happy story for the Sioux or for us. You know, we haven't even gotten into the boarding schools, the cutting of their hair, having your language taken away from you. And then let's talk about the bodies they found at the boarding schools in Canada and in the United States. And in the United States, there had been 710 indigenous people, mostly girls and women, who were reported missing over the past decade in Wyoming. That same state where Gabby, a young white woman, went missing. Did you notice all the coverage she got? There's more to talk about, and Kurt will tackle it. But let's just sing the 2 English verses of the Dakota hymn. Some insist that this was the hymn they sang as they walked towards the scaffolding where they would be hung. We don't believe it was the exact hymn, but let's sing it.
It's number 3.
Number 3.
Number 3.
Oh
Idahuye Oyasin. I will be back in about 43 years to do this in Dakota without the translation. And I want to clear up one thing about Lutheranism. I didn't really become a Lutheran. It's just that my job is to ask questions, and there's just a lot of questions to be asked there. In the early morning of November 29th, 1868, Colonel and Methodist minister John Chivington and his Colorado militia attacked the village of Cheyenne on the banks of Sand Creek in southeast Colorado. There was a truce flag flying in the village. Governor Evans had told them that they would be safe. Colonel Chivington said, "I haven't had an Indian to eat in over a week. They killed over 200 people, mostly elderly men, women, and children. The next day they rode into Denver with scalps and female genitalia hanging from their saddles, and they were cheered as heroes." Less than 2 years earlier, as Mary said in Mankato, Abraham Lincoln ordered the hanging of 38 Dakota men. What I want to talk about today is not necessarily a lineal chronology of time, but I just hope that what I can say might stimulate some thought and maybe some change. So how did we get here? Today, Indigenous people make up less than 1% of the population of the United States. And per their population, a higher percentage of them are incarcerated than any other race. A higher percentage of them don't finish high school. A higher percentage of them commit suicide, especially among teenagers. And they have the highest rate of poverty in the United States. Mary touched on the number of murdered and missing women in the Indigenous populations. Same applies to Canada. In 1436, there was a papal bull in Spain and Portugal that was called the Doctrine of Discovery. Subdominiation. And in 1452, that papal bull was revised to apply to Africa. What it did was give them the right to subjugate any peoples on any continent that were not Christians. And by subjugate, that meant they plop up on the sand and plant a flag, and it's theirs. Anyone who gets in the way could be enslaved or killed. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI, acting on behalf of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, made another papal bull that applied to North America. In 1823, the United States government adopted as part of the Constitution that same doctrine of discovery. This is the same United States Constitution that says that treaties with indigenous peoples are the supreme law of the land. The United States government entered into over 400 treaties with indigenous peoples in the United States, and they abrogated or blatantly broke every one of those treaties. In 1862, Governors Alexander Ramsey and subsequent Governor Sibley said that Dakota people should either be exterminated or driven from the borders of Minnesota. I'm going to show you something. You're not going to be able to really see this from where you're sitting, but Waantanka, who is a Minnesota Dakota woman, she's got a PhD in history from Cornell, among a lot of other credentials. What there is a photocopy of a poster, and these went up all over the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota is offering a $200 reward for any dead Indian. $200 in 1862. What they needed to do was provide a scalp, or a hand, an ear, even a finger would suffice. And if a Dakota woman was pregnant, they could cut her open and do the same thing with the unborn fetus. I want to talk about how this generational trauma leads to those statistics I talked about among indigenous people. To know that their land, their culture, their language, their lives were taken. And there was never anything to deal or make that right. And that gets us to where we are today with those statistics. Some of you that are my age might remember Vietnam and the My Lai massacre. So very similar to what happened at Sand Creek and Wichita and countless locations across the United States. For those of you who can't remember Vietnam, we might all recognize the Me Too movement and women who have been traumatized. And how it takes a while to realize what has happened and to acknowledge it and then start talking about it. So maybe we start talking now about the doctrine of discovery and how that's led to where we are now. There are more subtle ways that this subjugation and domination has happened. Renaming is linguistic imperialism. For a long, long time, there was a lake in the Twin Cities named Lake Calhoun. It created quite a bit of controversy in recent years when they renamed it its original name, Bede Makaska. The Calhoun that it was named after was a strong advocate of white people being able to own other people. And in an even more subtle way, Carl Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist, whom we all give credit for naming plants, flowers, in their Latin names. Renamed plants, flowers, crops that had names, indigenous names, for centuries and centuries before them. So reclaiming names could be one way to help reconcile some of this. You know, we say that Lincoln lived in the time he did. And we're not responsible for what our ancestors did. But indigenous people are still suffering the effects of what happened to their ancestors. Lincoln did what was reflective of his time. But the hanging of those 38 Dakota was a continuation of the doctrine of discovery. The renaming of places is a continuation of the doctrine of discovery. Murdered and missing indigenous women is a continuation of the doctrine of discovery. So how do we heal? Or should we heal? But for us all of us, to live a good life, we all need to heal. So what if we started this by changing our thoughts? The way we think. The doctrine of discovery gave us genocide, poverty, racism, capitalism. What if we would start to think about a new economy that was based more on gratitude and respect? Ernie LaPointe was the great-great-grandson of Sitting Bull, and he wrote a book about his great-great-grandfather. And he said that by our capitalistic standards of wealth, Sitting Bull would have been the poorest of all Lakota because he gave away everything he had to poor, to disabled, disadvantaged. What if we were to expect, demand the same thing from our so-called leaders today? Let us put our minds together and see if we can come up with a better future for our children. Be the mighty. Thank you.
I invite you to stand for the blessing. Great Spirit, our Creator God, look upon these faces gathered in holy community together and send them anywhere you would have them go. Walk with them so they may face the winds of change and walk the good road. Enlighten them, sustain them, and may God, our Creator, be with you this day and always.
Today we became your children. We will live as you taught us. We will from the grass and the herbs, from the breeze, from the passing rain, from the passing thunder in the deep waters. Before us there is beauty, behind us there is beauty. Allow us to walk a long life in happiness, completed in beauty.
Hymn number 286, Spirit.